Sophie gazed out the bus window as the bustling cityscape gradually gave way to a lush forest. She squeezed her daughter, Lily's hand, who sat beside her, offering a reassuring smile. The winding road through the outskirts of Asheville felt like a path to a new beginning, but uncertainty still weighed heavily on her shoulders. After a traumatic divorce and losing her job in the big city, Sophie had decided to start over here, where she had inherited a house from a distant uncle. The bus finally stopped in a small town. Sophie got off, helping Lily with their bags. They were greeted by a burst of summer heat and the constant hum of cicadas. The salty breeze from the nearby ocean mingled with the scent of wildflowers, creating an atmosphere that was both welcoming and challenging. "Welcome to Asheville," the bus driver said, helping them unload their luggage. "Your house is just a little further up that way." He pointed to a trail that wound through the forest. With bags in hand, Sophie and Lily followed the trail, their steps heavy on the dirt path. The way was surrounded by tall, dense trees, their canopies blocking most of the sunlight. Despite being tired, Lily seemed fascinated by the surroundings, watching the colorful birds and butterflies that fluttered by. "This is it," Sophie said, stopping in front of an old house, half hidden by the overgrown vegetation. The wooden structure was visibly worn by time and in desperate need of repairs. The windows were broken, and the peeling paint revealed layers of rotting wood underneath. "We'll fix this up," Sophie murmured, more to herself than to Lily. She knew she needed to be strong and optimistic, not just for herself but especially for her daughter. They entered the house, stirring up a cloud of dust as they opened the door. The interior was as deteriorated as the exterior, but Sophie saw potential. With hard work and dedication, this place could become a warm, welcoming home. Determined, she began cleaning the space, clearing away cobwebs and discarding broken furniture. "We'll make this beautiful, Lily. I promise it'll be a wonderful place for us," Sophie said as she watched her daughter explore the corners of the house with curiosity. That night, after a long day of work, mother and daughter settled into sleeping bags on the living room floor. Sophie stared up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the sounds of the forest seeping through the house. Despite all the challenges, she felt a renewed sense of hope. "Good night, Mom," Lily said, snuggling close to her. "Good night, sweetheart," Sophie replied, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Tomorrow will be a new day." The morning sun bathed the house in a golden light, filtering through the surrounding trees. Sophie woke up early, feeling refreshed despite the physical exhaustion. She knew there was a lot of work ahead, but she was determined to turn this place into a real home. The day began with more cleaning, and Lily helped in any way she could. Together, they managed to set up a makeshift kitchen and clean 2 of the bedrooms. In the afternoon, Sophie went into town to search for tools and supplies. There, she met some of the locals, who welcomed her with friendly, albeit reserved, curiosity. As she walked back along the trail with her purchases, Sophie met Ethan, a marine biologist living in the area. He was rescuing an injured bird and, upon seeing her, offered to help carry her bags. As they walked, they talked about the town and Sophie's situation. "If you need help with the house repairs, I know some people who can lend a hand," Ethan said as they walked. "Thank you, Ethan. Any help would be greatly appreciated," Sophie replied, feeling relieved to have found someone willing to assist. When they arrived at her home, Ethan helped Sophie unload her purchases and inspect the structural damage to the house. He pointed out the most urgent repairs and offered some practical advice. Lily, who watched the interaction with curiosity, quickly warmed up to Ethan. In the following days, Sophie tirelessly worked on the repairs. She used up all her savings to buy materials, and with Ethan's help and the support of some townspeople, she began to see significant progress. Lily, on her part, started exploring the town and made new friends at the local school, adapting quickly to her new environment. Each day, the house took on a new life. The windows were fixed, the walls received a fresh coat of paint, and the garden began to bloom with local plants and flowers. The work was hard, but Sophie felt a growing sense of satisfaction with each small achievement. One afternoon, while finishing up painting the garden fence, Sophie spotted representatives from real estate companies threatening the area with development projects. They seemed to be inspecting the region, making her heart race with concern. Ethan, who was nearby, noticed her unease. "They're getting more aggressive. We need to rally the community to protect the forest and our homes," he said, with a serious expression. Sophie agreed, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She knew that protecting this place was crucial, not just for her and Lily, but for all the residents and the preservation of the rich local biodiversity. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Sophie felt a renewed strength within her. With Ethan by her side and the support of the community, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "We'll fight for this, Ethan. We won't let them destroy our home," she affirmed, with conviction. "Absolutely, Sophie. Together, we can make a difference," Ethan replied, smiling. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, and Sophie was already up, ready to face another day of work. As she prepared breakfast, she watched Lily, who seemed increasingly comfortable in her new surroundings. Life in Asheville was beginning to take shape, but new challenges arose each day. The first difficulty Sophie faced was financial. Her resources were limited, and the savings she had brought with her were quickly dwindling. Despite the community's support, she needed to find a way to support herself and Lily. She decided to open a small veterinary clinic in the house. With Ethan's help, she spread the word around town and the surrounding areas, offering her services to treat both domestic and wild animals. Lily, meanwhile, started attending the local school. Although initially shy, she soon made friends and began adapting to the new routine. The classes were different from what she was used to in the city, but she was fascinated by the opportunity to learn about the local flora and fauna, something she hadn't experienced at her old school. One day, while Sophie was treating a client's injured dog, she noticed a group of men in dark suits wandering around town. They were representatives of the real estate companies, and their fixed gaze on her house and the surrounding forest made her uneasy. Their presence signaled that the threat of development was closer than ever. That evening, during dinner, Lily mentioned something she had heard at school. "Mom, today the teacher talked about how some people want to cut down trees to build hotels. Is that true?" Sophie took a deep breath, trying to find a way to explain the situation to her daughter without scaring her. "Yes, sweetie. Some people want to use the land to build things that might not be good for nature. But we're here to protect this place, right?" "Right, Mom. Can we do something to help?" Lily asked, determination in her eyes. "Yes, we can, my love. We'll do everything we can to protect our new home," Sophie replied, touched by her daughter's courage. The next day, while Sophie was at the clinic, Ethan showed up with a worried expression. "We need to talk urgently, Sophie. The company reps are pushing harder than ever. They have political support and could start construction soon." Sophie felt her heart tighten. She knew she couldn't fight such a powerful force alone, but she wasn't willing to give up. "What can we do, Ethan? How can we stop them?" Ethan suggested they mobilize the community for a large protest and start collecting signatures for a petition against the project. "We need to show that we're not alone and that many people care about preserving this forest." Sophie agreed, determined to do everything in her power to protect her home and the nature around it. She knew the battle would be tough, but with Ethan's support and the backing of the community, she felt stronger. The sun shone brightly in the sky, illuminating the small town as Sophie and Ethan organized a community meeting. They had handed out flyers and spoken to neighbors, explaining the importance of protecting the forest from destructive development. The response was positive, and many residents showed up to support the cause. During the meeting, Sophie presented the idea of the protest and the petition, explaining how they could use these tools to draw attention from authorities and the media. Ethan, with his experience in conservation, detailed the environmental impacts the project could cause, sparking concern and engagement among the attendees. The community showed unity and a willingness to fight. Several residents offered their skills and time to help organize the actions. Some began working on banners and signs for the protest, while others helped collect signatures for the petition. Meanwhile, the relationship between Sophie and Ethan continued to grow. They spent more time together, not just working toward their common cause, but also sharing personal moments and learning more about each other's stories and dreams. Ethan revealed that he had chosen to live in Asheville to escape the chaos of the city and find peace in nature, something that deeply resonated with Sophie's feelings. Lily, for her part, became increasingly involved in life on the island. She enthusiastically participated in school activities and even organized a small group of classmates to help collect signatures at school. Her energy and determination inspired Sophie, who saw in her daughter a reflection of her own resilience. One day, while Sophie and Ethan were walking along the beach, he opened up about his mysterious past. "I've never told anyone here, but before I came to Asheville, I worked for a big biotech company. It was a stressful job, and I realized I was drifting away from the things that really mattered, like nature and human connection." Sophie listened intently, feeling even more connected to Ethan. "I completely understand, Ethan. I also felt trapped in a life that didn't make sense until everything fell apart, and I was forced to start over." They stopped walking and sat on the sand, watching the waves gently break on the shore. "I'm glad our paths crossed, Sophie. I feel like we can make a big difference together," Ethan said, looking deeply into her eyes. "Me too, Ethan. I'm ready to fight for this, for us and for Lily," Sophie replied, feeling warmth in her chest. With Ethan's and the community's support, Sophie felt more confident and determined to face the challenges. They continued to plan the big protest, mobilizing more people and attracting the attention of the local media. The sense of unity grew every day, and Sophie realized that despite the difficulties, she was finding a new home and a new family in Asheville. The following days were filled with intense activity in the town. The community was mobilized, and the protest against the real estate companies was approaching. Sophie and Ethan worked tirelessly, organizing everything and ensuring that Asheville's voice would be heard. Their relationship also strengthened, marked by moments of mutual support and camaraderie. As the protest date neared, the company's threats intensified. Men in dark suits visited the town more frequently, trying to intimidate residents and offer bribes to make them abandon their resistance. A few succumbed to the pressure, but most remained firm in their decision to protect the forest. One day, Sophie received an unexpected call. It was her ex-husband, Richard, demanding a conversation. "Sophie, we need to talk. I'm involved in the real estate project in Asheville, and it's starting to affect my career. You need to stop this." Sophie's initial shock turned into anger. "So, you're the one behind this? You and those companies want to destroy our home, our community." "I won't allow it, Richard. You don't understand, Sophie. This is bigger than you think. If you keep this up, you might end up hurting yourself and our daughter," he threatened. "I understand perfectly, Richard, and I won't stay silent. I'm fighting for what's right, for our future, and for Lily's future," Sophie replied, ending the call with determination. The revelation that Richard was involved only increased her motivation to fight. She shared the information with Ethan, who supported her unconditionally. "This just shows we're on the right path, Sophie. We can't give up now." As they continued planning the protest, Ethan revealed more about his past. "Before I came here, I had to leave behind a life that didn't make sense. I worked for companies that only cared about profit without thinking about the consequences. Coming to Asheville was my chance to do something meaningful, to really protect what I love." Sophie felt a deep connection with Ethan, realizing that they were united by a greater cause. "We're in this together, Ethan, and we're going to win." The day of the protest finally arrived. The town's central square was packed with residents holding signs and banners, shouting slogans. Sophie stepped onto the makeshift stage, feeling the support of everyone around her. "We're here to protect our home, our forest, our community," Sophie began, her voice strong. "We won't let them destroy what we love. Together, we are strong." Ethan also spoke, explaining the environmental impacts of the project and the importance of preserving the Appalachian Mountains. The response from the crowd was intense, and the local media captured every moment, broadcasting live across the region. The protest was a success, but Sophie knew the fight was far from over. The real estate companies wouldn't give up easily, and she needed to be prepared for the next steps. As they walked home, she felt a renewed determination. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with Ethan by her side and the community united. The morning after the protest, Sophie woke up with a renewed sense of hope. She and Ethan had decided to meet with an environmental lawyer who had offered to help pro bono with the case. With the evidence of corruption they had gathered, they hoped to obtain an injunction to halt the real estate project. When they arrived at the lawyer's office, they were warmly welcomed. "I saw the protest on TV yesterday. You did a great job," he said, shaking Sophie and Ethan's hands. "Thank you," Sophie replied. "We're here to discuss the next steps. We have proof of corruption, and we want to use it to protect Asheville." The lawyer carefully reviewed the evidence, nodding in approval. "With this, we can put pressure on the local authorities. I'll prepare the necessary documents to file a formal case." Meanwhile, in the town, tensions continued to rise. The real estate company's representatives intensified their attempts at bribery and intimidation. One day, Sophie received an anonymous message warning about a secret meeting between the company executives and some local politicians. She knew she had to act quickly. Sophie and Ethan decided to investigate the meeting, hoping to find more evidence of corruption. Disguised and with a hidden recorder, they managed to infiltrate the location and record compromising conversations between those involved. The recordings were the proof they needed to expose the corruption. With the new evidence in hand, they returned to the lawyer, who quickly contacted the press. A press conference was scheduled to reveal the recordings and the evidence of corruption. The impact was immediate and devastating for the real estate companies and the politicians involved. On the day of the press conference, Sophie felt nervous but determined. Ethan stood by her side, holding her hand. "Let's do this," he said with an encouraging smile. Sophie stepped onto the stage, feeling the eyes of the press and the community on her. "We're here today to expose the truth. The real estate companies and some local politicians are involved in a corruption scheme that threatens to destroy our home, our forest, our community." The recordings were played, and the impact was immediate. Journalists asked sharp questions, and Sophie answered confidently. The evidence was irrefutable, and public pressure mounted. As the press conference continued, Sophie spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. Richard was there, watching everything. She felt a mix of anger and relief. She knew he could no longer threaten her. The evidence was out, and justice was beginning to be served. The fallout from the revelations was intense. Local authorities were forced to open a formal investigation, and the real estate project was suspended. The victory was celebrated by the community, who felt the weight of the threat lifting. That night, as Sophie and Ethan walked along the beach, they felt a renewed sense of peace. "We did it, Sophie. We protected our home," Ethan said, looking out at the ocean. "Yes, we did. And we'll do even more," Sophie replied, feeling grateful for Ethan's and the community's support. The battle was far from over, but Sophie knew they were on the right path. With Ethan's support and the community's unity, they were ready to face any challenge that came their way. The suspension of the real estate project brought temporary relief to Sophie, Ethan, and the Asheville community, but everyone knew the battle was far from over. The companies wouldn't give up easily, and those involved in the corruption still had power and resources to fight. Sophie and Ethan continued to work with the lawyer, gathering more evidence and strengthening the case against the companies. Meanwhile, the community remained vigilant and engaged, organizing awareness events and cleaning up the areas threatened by destruction. One day, while Ethan was on the beach collecting water samples for a study, he found a mysterious envelope left near his equipment. Inside were documents detailing additional plans by the real estate companies to bypass the legal suspensions and continue with the project. The discovery was alarming. "We need to act fast, Sophie," Ethan said, handing her the documents. "They're trying to circumvent the law and go ahead with the project." Sophie felt the urgency of the situation. "Let's gather the community and plan a big protest in front of the company's headquarters. We need to draw national media attention." In the following days, Sophie and Ethan worked tirelessly to mobilize the community. They distributed flyers, gave interviews to newspapers and TV stations, and used social media to promote the protest. The response was overwhelming, with people from across the country expressing their support. On the day of the protest, the square in front of the company's headquarters was packed with protesters holding signs and banners, demanding justice and protection for the Appalachian Mountains. Sophie and Ethan were at the forefront, leading the crowd with passionate speeches. The destruction of the Appalachian Mountains affects not just Asheville but our entire country and the world, Sophie declared, her voice echoing through the loudspeakers. We're here to protect our future, to ensure our children can live in a world where nature is respected and preserved. Ethan, by her side, added, "We won't let greed destroy what we love. We're united and determined. We'll keep fighting until justice is served." The crowd's response was deafening. The protesters chanted slogans, and the media presence ensured their voices were heard nationwide. Meanwhile, inside the headquarters, the company executives watched nervously as the public pressure mounted. Sophie and Ethan felt empowered by the massive support, but they knew the fight was far from over. During the protest, a journalist approached them with a crucial piece of information. One of the company executives was willing to testify against the corruption in exchange for immunity. This revelation was a turning point. With the executive's testimony, the case against the companies would gain undeniable strength. The lawyer quickly arranged a meeting to formalize the agreement and ensure the testimony was officially recorded. Meanwhile, Richard, Sophie's ex-husband, made one last desperate attempt to convince her to stop. He showed up at the protest, pulling her aside. "Sophie, please, you don't understand the consequences of this," Richard pleaded. "If you continue, you could end up hurting more people than you realize." Sophie looked at him, resolute. "I understand perfectly, Richard. I'm fighting for what's right, and nothing will make me stop." Richard realized his words would have no effect. He sighed, defeated. "I just hope you know what you're doing." "I do," Sophie replied with conviction. With the testimony secured and the growing public pressure, the case against the companies went to trial. The Asheville community watched with hope as the evidence was presented, and those involved in the corruption were exposed. The trial was long and exhausting, but in the end, justice prevailed. The real estate companies were found guilty of corruption and violating environmental laws, and the development project was permanently canceled. The victory was celebrated by the entire community, who could finally breathe a sigh of relief. News of the victory spread quickly, bringing a new influx of support and resources to Asheville. Environmental organizations and volunteers from across the country came to help preserve the Appalachian Mountains and develop sustainable projects in the town. Sophie and Ethan, now officially a couple, continued their work at the veterinary clinic and in conservation projects. With the new resources, they were able to expand their efforts, creating educational and preservation programs that benefited the entire community. Lily, inspired by her mother's fight and victory, became actively involved in the projects, showing a growing passion for nature and environmental protection. Sophie saw in her daughter a reflection of her own determination and courage. One day, as they walked along the beach at sunset, Ethan held Sophie's hand and spoke with a smile. "We did it, Sophie. We protected our home and made a difference." Sophie looked at him, feeling deep gratitude and love. "Yes, Ethan, and this is just the beginning. We have so much more to do." With the victory secured and the community united, Sophie finally felt at peace. She had found not only a new home in Asheville but also a new family and a renewed sense of purpose. As they watched the sun set on the horizon, they felt ready for any challenge that might come their way. They knew that, together, they could face any adversity and continue to protect what they loved. The impact of their victory was felt not only in Asheville but across the country. The community's fight inspired others to protect their own homes and unite against similar threats. Sophie and Ethan's legacy would be remembered for a long time as an example of courage, resilience, and love for nature. The future looked bright and full of possibilities. And with Lily growing up and learning from her mother and Ethan's examples, Sophie knew the next generation would continue to fight for preservation and respect for the environment. With one last look at the sunset, Sophie embraced Ethan and Lily, feeling complete and at peace. The journey had been arduous, but the reward was immeasurable. Together, they had found a refuge in the Appalachian Mountains and a home where love and nature flourished side by side.